Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Familiar Podcast, and not just the Familiar Podcast, but the inaugural Familiar Podcast. I'm here with Marsh from StrataGames, and my name is Peter. And this is a podcast about Pauper, and specifically about how to better yourself in Pauper, learning opportunities. And this specific podcast, this specific episode is on brewing, which is awesome because we have a master of brewing over here, Marsh. So brewing, Marsh, what do you like about brewing?
I like being able to express yourself with a brew. I think there's so many different ways you can play Magic. And especially Pauper, there's already a million different decks out there that you can play, whether it's tier 1 or tier 3 or fringe or whatever.
Mhm.
And yet there's still not a deck for every strategy ever. And so if you find the right cards, you could absolutely just like put together the new deck that does, whatever. You can do a tribe, slivers or whatever that hasn't seen a ton of play, or you can just build something with a 2-card synergy that you found, something like that. It's just really cool way to be able to leave your own mark on the game, especially if you're the first one to ever think of an idea, which is extremely difficult. But then people can kind of know you as the person who made that deck, and I really like that.
Yeah. Do you find yourself brewing a lot?
I do. I think that there's a lot of with making quite a bit of content on my own channel, there's sometimes not a lot of time for brewing because I'm always trying to put out enough videos and things like that. And so I don't always get to brew quite as much as I want, because I think a really good intense brew where you've kind of considered all the angles takes
Mhm.
a lot of time. And I think that if you just slap a couple cards together, that can be okay. And sometimes I do that for videos and things like that. But it's not anywhere near as good as if you've spent a good 4 or 5 hours really making sure the brew is solid. So not as
Yeah.
much time as I'd like.
Yeah. I found I really when I first started playing Magic, I loved brewing, and I would dig into a deck and just like try to create my own thing. And I was very unsuccessful at it. Um, and because it is really hard to like successfully brew a deck from scratch. The brewing I find myself doing more and more nowadays is more taking builds that already exist and just like throwing a card in it, or a change up in a card, or adjusting to our meta to get a competitive advantage by just like brewing something into the deck that others haven't seen before. But I think what I'd love to hear about is maybe a time that you've had a really successful brew, or maybe your most successful brew that you've created either from scratch or from stealing from someone.
Yeah. Real quick on your point that you were just saying, a lot of the brewing you do
Mhm.
nowadays is tweaking like a meta deck or something like that. I think people don't give enough credit to people who play mostly meta decks for brewing, because brewing is not all only building a deck from scratch. It's absolutely like finding a cool sideboard card, or a card, maybe even a main deck card that like tweaks your deck for certain matchups, or things like that. So people don't give that enough credit, and even if you don't brew decks from scratch, that's absolutely still brewing. But yeah, as far as my most successful brew would be Black Sack, or Mono Black Sacrifice, which I've always loved the sacrifice strategy. In fact, I was trying to get into Pauper about 8 years ago, far before I actually ended up doing so. And I half built a Golgari sacrifice deck that was kind of in the meta at the time. And that was one of the decks that I found that like really inspired me. And then I didn't have anybody to play Pauper with, so I like half put the deck together, never played it, took it apart. Probably 6 years after that, I actually started playing Pauper, and so I always loved that strategy and figured that I should try to bring it back. And so it was 2025 February that I saw another creator, YouTube creator by the name of Love Crayons, who took a Black Sack deck to a Pauper qualifier and got 9th out of 157 players with it. And this is before it was being played in anywhere in the format, in leagues, let alone in giant challenges and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And so I just thought it looked really cool and it did really well. So there had to be something to it. Of course, you can have a pile that's not very good and do well with it if you get super lucky. But he had a video on the deck and the run, and it just looked like there was really something there. And so I copied his exact list and played it on the channel, played a video of it like less than a week later because I was really excited about it. And people seemed to really like that video. I loved the deck and was like, well, we got to keep making something happen here. So I kept playing it like I think just about every week on the channel for several months, making slow changes to it. But yeah, that was when I found it, and it been in love with it ever since.
Yeah. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but the when I got back into Pauper after maybe a 5-year hiatus, and one of my previous favorite decks was a Gilgari sacrifice deck that ran the infinite combo with the 4-mana elf that when a green creature enters the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on it.
Ivy Lane
And
Denizen, yeah.
yeah, Ivy Lane Denizen. And pestilence creatures so that you could go infinite. And the which is still fun and still near and dear to my heart, and I will make it work again someday. But the but when I came back into Pauper, the first week I came in with like an old deck from 7 years ago, which obviously just got demolished. But then the following week, I actually saw the mono black sack deck, and I think I actually watched a video of you playing it, and so I threw it together and brought it to our Pauper league, or our Pauper night at 5-6 Gaming in Columbus, and was able to. I think I at least went 2-1, which was good enough for me.
That's great.
And I think I did 3-0 like the following week with the same deck. So it does have legs, and 5-6 Gaming in Columbus is not a slouch store, right? There's a lot of good players there and a lot of good decks. So it is a powerful brew. What kind of set in your iteration of the brew, what kind of set your changes apart, and like what kind of discoveries did you make with the deck?
Yeah, so I first took the initial list that I saw, and then started playing it, and then especially for content when I'm making videos, it's nice if every video has some slight difference in the deck because people like that more. So I started looking at cards on Scryfall, of course, the best place to look at cards, trying to find for your brew or whatever. And I started looking at every single card basically in black. I take a very holistic approach to brewing, where I will go to Scryfall and look legal and Pauper, the color that I'm looking for, and then look through every single card that could fit in a deck.
Wow.
I'm not suggesting that's the best way to do it, but it is a way that means that you're gonna find all the cards that you want to find, which I really enjoy. So that's pretty much what I did. And I made a list of 20 or so cards that I wanted to try out in the deck because there were so many. Like anything that had a dies trigger, any creature, or anything that like, made a creature come back from the graveyard or anything like that. Every single card that I could possibly think of that could be decent, I put on that list. And so then I started trying them out one by one, and started figuring out what worked, what didn't work. Obviously I was putting up videos of them. And so I think it's really important when you're brewing a deck to get feedback, because you're going to have a very myopic view of a deck. You're going to be too close to it and not really be able to get the full scope of it. And so maybe, that can be good. Maybe you're the only person who believes in the deck, and keeping that faith is absolutely great. But sometimes that means you're not considering things. You're not being truthful with yourself about how good the brew is, or how good it is in certain metas, or whatever. And I think it's very important that you get other people to look at your brew. So the easiest way to do that is, throw it together, take it to your LGS for your FNM or your weekly or whatever, and play it against some people. And then after the match, ask your opponents like, hey, what do you think of this deck? Is there anything that can improve? Anything that you liked or didn't like, or anything like that? And almost every single player you're going to play against is going to love to engage in a conversation like that. And so it's not going to be hard to convince them to suggest their favorite card to put in the deck. And so that's definitely what I started doing. I noticed that the the videos were doing really well. So I maybe a little too zealously, I created a Discord server for the deck
Hmm.
only a month after I started playing the deck, which was pretty ambitious because not every established deck in the format even plays or has a Discord server. Um, but I thought I could make it something. And I will say, only a little over a year after that started, we have over 500 people in that Discord, which is more than the majority of you know, Pauper specific deck servers. So very proud of that. But basically, I realized I was not going to be able to try out every single version of this deck myself. And so I needed some people who had more time than me or just were smarter than me or whatever. And so that was one of the ways that I approached it. I'm not suggesting everyone starts a Discord server for whatever brew they're working on, but getting a lot more people to comment on your brew via video comments or a Discord or just, again, people at your LGS is a great way to make sure that you're not missing anything, and people will suggest cards you've never even heard of. I've been playing for way too long. I've seen so many cards in the game, but there are always going to be cards that you haven't heard of that could make your brew really good. So
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really good point, right? We kind of talk about um, we kind of attach names to a brew, but in reality, brews are almost always community creations. They're almost always a coming together of a bunch of different ideas, and usually a bunch of different failures, and coming together to kind of form something that's usable. Um, and that is a really good point. Discords are a really great place for that. I'm on a few discords myself. I think I'm on elves and fairies, and I've gotten a lot of good information from there. And there's almost always a brewing corner where there's people that are talking about, okay, what's the next best thing. The most recent, I think, shift with elves was, and this might not be the most recent, but there was a new release of a rooftop percher,
yeah,
which people thought was such a silly card to put into a sideboard. And I remember I was on the Brewing channel with some other Elves players, and we were talking about rooftop percher. I'm like, this might have legs. This might be possible. And some people ran it. Some people had success. I had success with it as well. And then it ended up at Paupergeddon, and it's, again, sometimes it's facing some silly card that's just an idea of people, and getting that testing out and letting other people test it for you can be really valuable too. So it's a community that builds a brew. It's not just an individual, or else you're going to hit a wall.
yeah, for sure. And I think that Rooftop Perch is a great example because that's a card that I saw and a lot of people saw during spoiler season for Lorwyn, and it didn't look that impressive. It was a little overcosted. It did a lot of little things, so it didn't seem like it would be that good. But then I played against it, and it's all those little things add up. It's got life gain, graveyard hate. The fact that it's an elf is super
Hmm.
relevant, obviously, in that deck, and also the fact that it's colorless is super good against like prismatic strands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of Pauper is one of the things I love most about Pauper. There's a million things, but is that niche little things like being a colorless creature is so relevant
Hmm.
that in a lot of other formats it doesn't matter as much if a card's devoid, for example. But a Chrysalis, can't get hydroblasted, we all know. And so I love that little things like that are actually relevant.
Yeah. And for those of you listening, a rooftop percher is a 5 mana, 5 generic mana for a 3/3 flyer with changeling, which means it's every creature type. And when it enters, you can exile up to 2 target cards from a graveyard, and you gain 3 life. So it does a little bit of everything. It gives you a flyer in elves. It gives you a 3/3 that, like you were saying, is colorless, so you can get around. It's great to bring in against Gates decks, potentially block a Guardian of the Guild pack.
Yeah.
It also has some incidental graveyard removal, which can be really valuable against like a mono red madness deck, and as well as the gain 3 life clause is great against some aggro matchups. So it doesn't do anything super well, but it does everything just enough that it finds a place, it finds a home in a lot of elf sideboards.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to, when you're brewing, try everything. Like, specifically try cards that don't look great, because you never know. Like, obviously, I'm not saying put a card that from a different color or like something that's like 7 mana in your aggro deck, but like if it in any way resembles a card that might fit your deck, you should give it a try. I think Rooftop Perch is a great example. Another great example, going back to Black Sack, is Nested Shambler, is a card that in the early stages of the deck, I didn't think looked very good for the deck, because we already had one drop fodder creatures that die into other fodder creatures that make flyers and that make untapped creatures, that make mercenaries that can pump your other creatures. And Shambler made tapped squirrels with no abilities, and that seemed just bad. But I was not taking into account the fact that if you pump its power and make 7 squirrels, 3 is the big one, but sometimes you can make even more than that, then that's way better than getting one creature with flying or anything like that. And so that was something initially that I just hadn't considered, because at the time we weren't playing Supernatural Stamina in the deck. Someone found this combination, and it is the reason the deck is viable at this point, is because that combination is so good. So even if something doesn't quite feel like something that you should be playing, or it doesn't quite resonate with you, at least give it a try for a few leagues or a few matches at your LGS, because it could just be the next best thing.
Right. And now that's probably the one of the most important cards in the whole deck. It glues it all together.
Yeah, the deck would not function to the same degree if it didn't have it. So I was very wrong about that, I will fully admit.
Yeah. And again, along the lines of Black Sack, there's also this reality that a brew that you try in the past may be viable in the future, right? So we were talking about the Gilgari Sack version of the sacrifice strategy. And I remember having to run cards like I'm not even going to look up the name, but it's the green Zubera that
Mm-hmm.
functions very similar to in that when you sacrifice it for each other Zubera that died that turn, you get a 1/1 spirit. So it's a 2-drop, and what you could do is you could do a recursion spell on it in response to sacrificing it, so that you could double up the triggers. So for one recursion spell plus instant speed recursion spell plus Zubera, you could get 6 creatures. And that was kind of the strategy you had to do, and it was challenging. And now you get just about the same rate for a 1/1 for 1, um, which just makes the deck so much better. Plus you don't have to break into another color. So as new cards are released, again, it's one of the exciting things about brewing is your decks potentially get better. And I find myself during spoiler season for a new set, just getting so excited about possible new commons that could really shift the format or shift my brew ideas and help me to create something new and exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually, I sometimes, when I have an idea that I really want to make work, and I've spent a good number of hours trying to make it work, and I just don't think that the cards exist for it, I will keep that deck in a folder somewhere and like write down, I need this card to be printed, and then this deck will be viable. So like, like Black Sack before we had Mortician Beetle so integral, like probably wouldn't work very well without Mortician Beetle. So if we were brewing Black Sack right now and didn't have that, being like a 1-drop that grows as you sacrifice stuff alongside the others, like noting those down and then revisiting them every couple of months, every couple sets that are released. It's a long shot that your one brew is going to get the perfect card, a couple months down the line. But if you have a dozen different brews that you're working on, and over the course of a year or two, you might find that some of those cards get printed. And I never want to forget an idea is the big thing, and so I always have things written down everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, and along the lines of community, so just kind of doing a quick synopsis of what we just talked about, that first step is to kind of have an idea for a brew. And no matter how small that is, whether it's a synergy or a full deck that you have an idea for, that's kind of the starting point. Or if you're just looking at maybe changing one card to a meta deck, that's a great starting point. Um, and then spending that time brewing, the iterating, so changing things up testing it out against players, and then receiving feedback, whether it's against the players you're playing against or in a community. And speaking of a community, the Ohio River Valley Pauper Discord is an awesome community. And they have as one of their channels is a brewing corner, and there's a lot of great brewers on there that you can get some ideas from. Um, I've gotten good feedback from that group as well, and I think there's a lot of potential to make those connections and get that feedback, because when I know that it's a little cliche, but kind of the beauty of Magic is the gathering, right? And is the iteration and is the working through, and building decks together and building that community. And so that's a great place to start. So if you're not a part of the Ohio River Valley podcast, or sorry, the Ohio River Valley Discord, I highly recommend it. I think Marsh will go ahead and put a link to the description for this podcast, so that anybody that would like to join it could join it. But it's a great community, and it's a great place to see where Pauper is going on locally. And in fact, before this podcast, I reached out um, to the Ohio River Valley Discord and asked the Brewers Corner some advice they would give about brewing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and read some examples, and we'll give Marsh a chance to give his feedback on what he thinks about these people's responses. So this first one I have here is from the David Morris, the creator of the Ohio River Valley Discord. Is his recommendation is that you have to learn the meta before you can beat the meta. What's your thoughts on that, Marsh?
I think that there has not been a truer sentence. You really need to know what is being played before you can brew a deck that's going to be able to exist in the meta. I think one of the biggest challenges I've faced getting people into the format is that the very first thing they want to do is brew. And I totally understand that desire. I'm of course a brewer, and so I get wanting to just start like that. But you don't know any of the decks in the format. You don't know what cards are good. You don't know anything about it. You could build just about anything, and it's probably not going to be right, quote unquote, because you just don't know what the meta is, um, and so yeah, like I understand the desire, but I think the most important thing, you can start tinkering with a brew. When I jumped into Pauper, it took me probably a month before I was brewing a deck, so I understand. But I was also playing meta decks alongside that, and really making sure that I was like learning the format, knowing what was good and what was bad and things like that, because you're gonna have blind spots everywhere. So the first brew that I really did in the format was a Demir scam deck that I have some videos up on my channel as well, using Girder Goons, which is a 4 and a black 4/4 creature that when it dies, you get a 2/2 rogue tapped, but it has blitz for 3 and a black. So if you blitz it, it has haste, it dies at the end of turn, and you draw a card when it dies. And so you combine that with your supernatural stamina or your not dead after all, and you get a really big 4/4 that dies into a 2/2, and you get your 2/2, and you get a card draw. Like there's so much value there. And I started brewing this deck, and there's a lot of cool stuff with it, but I didn't realize that, if you're playing a blue-black control mid-range deck, you probably want to be playing Counterspell. You probably want to be playing Snuff Out and Cast Down. And I didn't know all of these cards were available to me. And so my first iteration was pretty bad. And so you're just going to have a lot of blind spots as far as cards you should include, what you're looking to beat, and all these different things. That it's pretty important to learn the meta by playing a meta deck and playing against meta decks before you can really brew and know what's going to actually work.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I'm very familiar with the person that comes to the store and it's their first time playing Pauper, or they're coming in from a commander format, or they're coming in from modern. They're like, hey, I'm going to bring this brew. I had some commons that I got from my recent draft. And they try to throw something together, and they realize that Pauper is a super competitive format. that is very, very optimized. I'm not saying there's not room to brew. I think there's a lot of room to brew, but it's easy to get it just like show up and get destroyed if you're just bringing a brew. And I can speak to that because that's what happened to me when I first came in. And came back to Pauper and had to kind of switch up and go towards a more meta deck and give it a go. But I think there was a this is another quote from someone. They recommend that you get good at playing sealed first before you play Pauper so that you can kind of build up to a 60 card format. And this is from Ryan at 5-6 Gaming. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I've heard a very similar thing for a long time, which is that limited drafting, sealed, anything like that is going to teach you the very basic components of playing Magic well, because you are operating with the kind of lowest resource pool possible. You know, you only can use the cards that you specifically opened or drafted, as opposed to any card in your collection or any card that exists anywhere. And you really have to make it work with those cards, and then you have to make it work in your 40 card deck when you're playing. It's like limited is so very much like Pauper, is very reliant on you making the most of the couple cards you do have. You know, you're not going to have a removal spell every single turn like a constructed control deck. You maybe only have 2 or 3 removal spells in your entire deck. You really need to use them very cautiously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that does relate a lot to Pauper, in that obviously we have more removal spells and things like that, access to those, but we are playing I wouldn't say a low power format. It's a very high power format, but it is very much like you kind of have those limited resources. And it's very important many times in a game, especially if you're not playing like a huge control deck with tons of card draw, you're going to get down to only having a couple cards in hand. You really need to make sure those cards are going to win you the game, because if they're not, then you're not going to get it out. You're not going to get out of the game with a victory. And so, yeah, I think there's definitely some truth to that.
Yeah, and especially in terms of brewing, I just thought of this, but the reality is when you're building a sealed deck, you are brewing, right?
Yeah,
you're you're basically starting from scratch. You have a pool in front of you, and it's basically a activity or a an exercise in brewing a deck from this scratch of this card pool. Now you have a limited card pool, so and you have some design from Wizards to kind of steer you in a direction that is helpful, but it works a similar muscle, I think.
yeah, that's a great point. I mean, with a sealed pool, you know, maybe you were lucky and opened 10 removal spells. Well, removal is great, but you don't necessarily need that many. And so you're brewing just knowing like, oh, how many of these should I put in? Should I be more of a control deck, or should I be more of a mid-range or an aggro deck? Those are the things you're thinking about when you're brewing a deck in Constructed too. And you have the ability to put any card that exists in the format in your deck, but having the wisdom to choose the right cards is absolutely a lot like sealed there.
Yeah, and this is I love Commander as a format, and I think this is speaking towards the heart of Commander players too. And also this quote from this user from Ben at 5-6, where he recommends that you start with Slimes of Humanity, then figure out the rest. If your deck turns into a pile of ooze, then it's perfect. The I think that one of the joys and the secret unlocks brewing is it shifts you away from seeing the only success being winning, if that makes sense. So it's you're almost setting a second mission where it's not just okay, I need to go to my Pauper night, get a 3-0, and that's what success looks like, or a 2-1, that's what success looks like. If you're brewing a wild strategy or you're trying out a pet card, your victory could be that you take one game in one of your matches and win in the most ridiculous way possible. And I feel like that's a little bit of an overlap with some like casual Commander as well, where sometimes the winning isn't winning the game, the winning is doing what you want to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think I'm a very competitive person. I know you're pretty competitive. So a lot of what I'm saying here is like these might be the best ways to win or to have a better, competitive brew. But yeah, there's absolutely a ton of fun in just having a deck that does the thing, which is a big commander quote. And so yeah, even if you're not gonna win every match you're gonna play, like as long as you have a good time and create something unique, like that's absolutely a victory there.
All right. Awesome. Well, great. Do you have any last things you want to say before we close things up?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that if you want to brew, you should brew. And that can start with finding a cool card that you think isn't in enough decks, or it can start with you ripping a deck list from somebody else that you really liked and trying to iterate on it. But I think, you know, definitely learn the meta as we talked about, but at some point just jump into it. And don't give up on your brews, I think is a big thing. Black Sack I was been working on now for over a year, about a year and a half. It's gone up and down in the meta. There were times where people were saying maybe it's a tier 1 deck, and I'm
Mhm.
not quite sure it was ever quite there, but it's not a bad deck, and it goes up in the meta. Sometimes it comes down. It's not always the best thing to be playing, but and of course your brews will be the same, but in the right meta with the right cards and with enough faith, I think you can make something that you can be really proud of.
All right. Thank you so much, Marsh. Um, yeah, thank you all for joining us for our inaugural um, podcast of the Familiar Podcast. And we appreciate you all joining us today. As a friendly reminder, again, if you want to connect to your community and you're in the Ohio, Kentucky, Kentucky,
Indiana.
Indiana area, and maybe even a little bit of Michigan, um, the Ohio River Valley Discord is a great place to connect with people and find opportunities to play some Pauper. So thank you all for joining again, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
See you next time.
And I think it'd be cool to just talk about now for our YouTubers, what is going on in your game.
Yeah, so I've been against White Weenie, which is not a good matchup, I will
Mm-hmm.
say. Game 1, we had a really strong start. We mulliganed to 5, they mulliganed to like 4, but they ended up getting a couple battle screeches. If they have no interaction here, I think we're going to be in a very good spot, because we're pretty much killing all of their guys. I don't
Yeah.
anticipate them to have no interaction. I assume there will be a Prismatic Strands, maybe a Guardian's Pledge, and it's going to go pretty poorly for us, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine prismatic strands is probably your biggest weakness, right?
Yes, that is the number one reason why we are not favored in this matchup. Um, Especially because Rite of Consumption deals damage. It does not cause loss of life, which means Prismatic Strands can blank it. So I actually cited
Yeah.
those out as I do
Mm-hmm.
because it is a little thing that like maybe your opponent doesn't know if if
Mm-hmm.
they're holding it and they cast it. But I usually give my opponent the benefit of the doubt. Always expect that your opponent's going to play properly,
Yeah.
and so it's a Guardian's Pledge, which means honestly Prismatic might have been better here because I actually grew all of these to not die, but now obviously
Mm-hmm.
they're all going to die,
Mm.
um, because everything's bigger. So that blocks here. Oh, this doesn't even kill the Skyfisher. Yeah, now we lose. Unfortunately.
Yeah, because
Yeah, I can kill this guy, and this guy. But we lose all of our guys.
yeah, and I imagine you're the beatdown in this matchup.
Yeah, for sure. The thing about Black Sack is it is the beatdown in almost every matchup. Like
Mhm.
there's the only decks that I would say are faster than it, like on average, are the turbo aggro decks, like Infect, Kiln Fiend, maybe Mono White Heroic sometimes. But even that one's a little slower. Like if we're not disrupted, we usually can get a turn 4 win pretty easily, sometimes a turn 3 win.
Mhm.
And so yeah, we're definitely the beatdown, but the problem is they have so many creatures to chump block with. Thraben Charm can deal 10 damage to a creature, so no matter how big it is, it can kill that. They can grow all their guys, and then of course Strands is pretty brutal.
Yeah. I found at least my favorite decks, and I think some of the most powerful decks in Pauper are decks that can kind of play on two axes. And Mono Black Sack is probably one of the most aggro decks, but also I think its other benefit is it also plays kind of like a combo deck. You have the potential to combo out and just beat somebody out of nowhere.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree. I never like thought of it that way until a lot of people started being like, "Oh yeah, you have that combo finish," and it's like I don't know. I always thought of it. Maybe it's just because I think the word combo is
Hmm.
dirty or whatever. But I always thought of it as a synergy. Bloodthird
Hmm.
Vampire and Rite of Consumption. It would never be a combo, but it certainly is. If you get like I said, you can win on turn 3. Usually that involves a vampire, a Rite of Consumption, a Shambler, and a Stamina.
Hmm.
But it could also be like 2 Sadistic Lees instead of the Rite of Consumption. There's a few different things you can do, but yeah, it's not quite a 2-card combo, but it is like 2 cards plus a bunch of fodder, and you're gonna get them.
Yeah. Yeah, I had someone it's similar to elves, right? Like the you could
Yeah,
argue that Priest of Titania is a combo card.
I often do argue that actually, because I for a long time I heard elves players describe it as an aggro deck, and I thought that
Hmm.
was laughable
Yeah.
because you can have 10 1-drops on the field as an elves player, and if your opponent has 1/2/2, you're probably not attacking into them because you don't want to lose your one precious elf. And I'm like, that's not an aggro deck. So I've always thought of it as more of a combo deck. But yeah, like Black Sack, it's Priest of Titania plus Quarian maybe, and then X elves, however many elves you have. Um, Although the more I've seen Priest of Titania on the board, and then lead the Stampede into Quarian, play that, untap your Priest into another lead the Stampede. I almost think of it as a Storm deck sometimes now,
Hmm.
because that's kind of how it plays. If it gets going, it'll cast 15 cards in the same turn, eventually an enormous Hydra.
Yeah.
So it's hard to quantify. To be honest, a topic that I want to bring up for a podcast in the future is just kind of just defining some of these archetypes. I think there are a lot of decks that people say are a certain archetype and aren't. And
Hmm.
is it really important? Not necessarily, but I think there is something to be learned by like redefining some of these archetypes.
Yeah. Also redefining them in your own brain. When I first started playing elves, I had some success with it. And when you kind of stick on a deck for a long time, you start to really enter into like you start to identify facets of it that people don't realize. And it was interesting because as I was playing it more and more, I realized that elves is one, you can play it on the facet of like, okay, I'm going to play everything out. This is a combo deck. I'm going to get my combo on turn 3 and kill them, or they're going to wipe my board and I'm going to lose. And it's like one or the other, or I'm going to refill and then maybe build my combo again and win or lose. Um, but the power of elves in the format right now is that it's also an extremely powerful mid-range strategy,
Yeah.
and realizing that and shifting to that mid-range strategy is really what shifted how I see the deck. um, and I found that, and this actually was even when you and I played at the 1K. I even got this sense a little bit too, where it's like, okay, if I have this board wipe for the elves, they're just gonna lose at this point. But there's a whole different strategy that you can take, and this like different corner you can take where you're like, okay, I'm no longer an aggro deck because this is a matchup where my combo and my aggro strategy is never going to win, and I'm going to shift to this mid-range strategy and I'm going to play out the most grindy game in the world. And elves can outgrind most decks very
Yeah.
successfully.
It's definitely like we've seen a lot of Pauper decks. It's kind of a quirk of Pauper is most combo decks have at this point a backup mid-range plan.
Hmm.
You have that with Spy. You have that with, I mean, you had that with Basking Broodscale when it was there. We just had that with Seeker Bow combo.
Hmm.
Um, Even like Walls combo sometimes had some Avenging Hunters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's this weird quirk, and like yeah, Elves plays similarly. You're not necessarily sideboarding out the combo when in
Hmm.
bad matches where you're just like, oh, I'm taking all 4 spies out, but maybe you cut a couple. I would assume you're not cutting priests, but
Hmm.
Timberwatch elves or maybe some 1-drop elves, so you lose some speed, but you gain that resilience of like having a bunch of 4/4s for 4 that gain you some life or whatever, and have reach and
Hmm.
trample and stuff like that.
Yeah, which it's funny to think about, but in your like mono red madness matchup, you are a lot of times pulling out your Priest of Titania, because it's just sits there, and that's the biggest weakness of elves is
Yep.
is if they have early disruption and they are a combo deck. If you get actually just combo decks in general are a challenge for elves, and that
Yeah.
I found. If they're a little slower combo, that's fine. I was a little nervous about the bow combo
Hmm.
because I was really like, yeah, this may be the nail in the coffin for elves. But luckily it was banned, so everyone's happy. But
Yeah. Yeah. Elves has been getting more interaction, either through like Monstrous Emergence, which is relatively new, or even
Mhm,
through like Lignify, which is not a new card, but it's a card that people kind of rediscovered.
mhm.
But I think all of that interaction as at the moment is sorcery speed.
Sorcery speed,
So
yeah.
yeah, pretty easy to assemble 2 card combo like that, especially when they're giving it haste. Pretty difficult for you to interact with unless you're going to start packing like Deglammers or something, which is not really where you want to be.
Yeah, and it hurts the main strategy of the deck a lot.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to build like a creature based, all of your card advantage is based on creatures, and then you side in 4 to 8 removal spells that are not grabbed by your creature grabbing, and it's rough.
Yeah. Yeah. That
It's
seems tough.
playing to lead the stampede into like 5 of your sideboard cards and not being able to grab any of them is is
I
a
will
really
say I'm
painful feeling.
delighted every time that because I'm never the one playing elves. So yeah, whenever I see winding way into lead, forest, monstrous emergence, I'm like, chef's kiss.
um, all right, I have a mono black sack question for you.
Yeah.
The I so we have the 5-6 um top 8 for our
Hmm.
Pauper League coming up, and I know my round one opponent is almost certainly going to be on Gilgari Gardens,
Okay.
and I'm considering running mono black sack, and he runs a hyper like creature removal version, and so I'm
Mm.
torn on it. Um, I don't know
Yeah.
what your thoughts are.
Is it like traditional gardens that you're assuming as opposed to like food pest or anything?
Not food pest. It is more traditional, running the rat, um,
Okay.
crypt
And like
rats,
black
and then
Thorn of the Black Rose and stuff like that.
does he run Thorn? I think he does run Thorn
Okay.
inside. But yeah.
Yeah, I usually consider any form of gardens to be a medium matchup. It's not
Hmm.
usually it's not your worst, which is like Grixis Affinity or Boros Synth that just have tons of removal, can put blockers in front of your guys for days, and of course have Krark in Grixis. So it's not quite that bad, but of course it's a lot of removal, which is bad for you. The thing that I usually find helps, especially against traditional gardens, is because I started playing Pauper with traditional
Hmm.
Golgari Gardens about 2.5 years ago. And so I'm pretty the list of course has evolved a little bit, but I'm pretty intimately aware of what that list used to look like, which was like 4 Snuff Out at the time, 4 Tithing Blade. I think it's probably more like 2 Tithing Blade at this point. Defile, and of course some cast downs.
Hmm.
So the thing about all that is that Snuff Out totally useless against you unless they want to kill your mercenary for 4 life. You're great. So
Hmm.
that's a waste of 4 of their cards. Tithing Blade, as long as you play around it, because you can get God if you don't, but as long as
Yeah.
you're like, they could have a Tithing Blade and always keep a fodder creature, that's going to be fine too. And then Defile can get you, but even if they have a swamp every single turn, if you play right, you
Outgrow it.
can outgrow that a little bit. So suddenly their 14 removal spells is really only the 4 cast downs that you have to worry that much about.
Hmm.
And so it's very much playing properly. Because again, you can get got by the Tithing Blade or the Defile, but if you play properly, you only have to worry about a few removal spells. And then I think the match is even to maybe even a little favored.
Hmm.
Um, so I would say it's one that is very complex as I'm describing a lot of this. So if you're not super familiar with Black Sack, although I think you've said you've played it a fair amount before.
Yeah.
So I think you might be fine with that. I don't think it's like, it's probably not the deck that I would pick if I was trying to beat my round one opponent.
Hmm.
I'm trying to think what's really good against Gardens.
Yeah, I'm torn. So here's my 5 potential decks.
Sure.
Um, is elves, which is, I think it's a fine matchup. I can kind of fight it out, but it's not the best matchup, especially the way that he's built his deck to be as anti elves as possible.
Yep.
2 would be fairies. Is another deck that I'm a little bit more comfortable with.
Like
Mono
Demir
black sack.
or Mono
No,
Blue.
mono blue.
Okay.
Mono blue fairies. Mono black sack. Technically, I have mono white weenies that I've never had success with, and it is also its worst matchup. So, um, it's like I was
It's
looking
a
up the
tough one.
meta for mono white against gardens, and it's like a 20-30%.
Oh, really? I wouldn't
Yeah.
expect that much. Again, the traditional version might be a little better. I know that White Weenie against Food Pest, I'm not actually that worried about
Mm-hmm.
because, first of all, White Weenie's gotten a lot of 3 toughness creatures in the last few years. Leonardo,
Yeah.
it plays Bugler now if you're playing Darval. But also Pestilence, its board wipes are much slower because it's a 4 mana Pestilence and then 3 damage. Plus,
Mm-hmm.
you can blank some of it with Strands. But if it's the traditional version, they can play a Crypt Rats on turn 3 and wipe your board a little easier. So I bet that would be tough.
Yeah. And then number 4 would be to play mono red pingers,
I
which
was
is
going to make a joke that your 4 first decks were all monocolored in different ones and you needed a mono red deck to go with it. So I guess you have your Wooburg
yes.
choice there.
Yeah, it's been one of my secret goals that I just, when I started getting back into Pauper, I'm like, I just want one decent deck in each of the colors. And I almost went with Madness Burn, but I wanted to build mono red pingers because I thought it was more friendly for teaching my son how to play.
Sure, yeah, a little less explosive.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, this is honestly probably another podcast topic, but I think Pauper being such a haven for monocolor decks, like monocolor decks actually thriving, is again another reason that it's such a great format. Because I was literally looking the other week at probably last week at the metas of all the other formats, modern and
Uh-huh.
legacy and stuff, and like maybe one of them has one monocolor deck in the top 10 decks because it's
Hmm.
just, well, if you have fetch lands or shocks or whatever, like why would you play monocolored if you can splash,
Right.
there are a lot of 2 color decks for sure, Boros Energy and stuff like that, but there's no mono white energy or mono red because it's like, well, why would you do that? That's just like
Hmm.
silly. But the cost of the tap lands and Pauper being a real cost makes it so that we have so many great monocolor decks that, like, I don't know, I love it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's one of the best features of Pauper is there's a real consequence to running multiple colors.
Yep,
And I feel like that's how Magic was originally designed to be. And I think
for
it's one
sure.
of like, I think when you do have that consequence, it actually is the game limiting itself in a good way. Um, and that's what like kind of brings about, I think, a lot of creativity in Pauper. It's like, oh yeah, I would love to throw green in my mono black sack deck and have like these other 3 cards, and that'd be great. And then you realize it destroys your deck because you can't
Yep.
keep up the speed.
Give me a black Rancor, please.
There is one, right? It's 2 mana though.
I mean,
It doesn't give trample.
that's a big
What's
difference. It
I
doesn't
don't
give
think it gives
trample.
trample either.
That's what Rancor is there for. Is the trample and the fact that it comes back over and over. So yeah,
Yeah, I
we
think it.
have that. It just doesn't give trample. It doesn't come back. It's 2 mana.
I
Sounds
think
great, Peter.
it does come back though. It does come back. What
Oh,
is it?
okay, okay. Yeah, I think there was
It
a cycle of cards that did that at one point.
yes. Let's check the. I didn't talk about it this time, but the Magic Bazaar.
Yeah, I poked around a little bit on it and couldn't figure it out. So I'll have to
So
get a
here's the
tutorial.
other fun thing about it is I can never figure out how to do it actually on the site. I can only do it by getting it through Google. So if I Google cards like this Bazaar, then
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I can get into it.
That makes
Cards
sense.
like Rancor Bazaar.
See, I usually just
Bazaar.
do a hyper specific Scryfall. So I just did legal Pauper, type aura, and then text when graveyard return hand.
Okay. See if you can find it before I do.
Uh,
It's
well, I
taking too
found
long to load.
Despondency, which is -2/-0 for an aura for 2 mana. And when it goes to the graveyard, return to your hand.
Oh, really?
Or there's 3
Minus two.
mana in black that gives fear
Hmm.
that comes back. Sleeper's Guile.
Okay, maybe I just don't know what the card does. Maybe it is -2, minus.
There's a few others in other colors as well. Like there's a fire breathing one for red. Obviously, Rancor's the best by far, but yeah, those are the only two black ones I'm seeing.
Darn. Yeah, I've always, speaking of brews, I was thinking about the other day, I'd love like a strategy that utilizes Rancor to sacrifice to, what's the bargain
Bargain.
ability?
I played a deck that did that a little bit. It was like a mono green stompy with, what's the bargain card? It's like some Brave the Wilds.
Mm-hmm.
Permanently turns a land into a 3/3 if you bargain. And then you have, of course, you have some indestructible lands, some bridges, and some Darksteel Citadels. So you get your indestructible land trick, but it was mono green stompy, so it was also using Rancor and, of course, like Colony Gardens and stuff like that. Some Maker Wellsprings. It was a really cool deck.
Yeah. The
Not to be like, oh, your brew exists. Of course, that's always the
case. Yeah, there was a what's the other card? Sidisi's Faithful. I don't think that's bargain though. It's Saxic.
It's Exploit.
Exploit. Yeah. Sidisi's Faithful, I think, is one of the more powerful cards in Pauper that is not showing up in anything.
There's someone at our LGS at Mavericks in Mason, Ohio, that that plays a Tethmos High Priest Gates deck, which is the one that every single time you target it with a spell, you reanimate a 2-drop. And it plays Sidisi's Faithful as a 1 or a 2 of, because you can sacrifice whatever you want, so you can bring it or something else back, and then it's also a unsummon on a stick that you can reanimate. It's a really cool brew.
I have it running in my my green blue evolve brew.
Nice. High toughness. That makes sense.
High toughness. Yeah, so it triggers evolve. And there's a lot of like fodder creatures that I end up with in the deck. That just like put 1/1 counters on stuff and just have toughness. And there was a game I was playing against somebody where I Sidisi's Faithful returned itself, sacrificing one of my fodder creatures, played it again, returned itself, sacrificing one of my fodder, played it again, evolved 3 times, and then swung for the win.
That's all. You got to send me this deck. That sounds awesome.
It was a fun one. Yeah, I'll have to send it to you. Though I just did learn that I was storing a good number of my decks on tapped out, and tapped out's not a thing anymore.
Brother, you got to join the 21st century. So about 3 years ago, I was all tapped out because I hadn't, like, there were newer sites, but there was nothing that like I thought was good enough to warrant transferring everything. And then Moxfield became a thing. And I'm like, well, Moxfield is, in my opinion, perfect.
Yeah.
Not a sponsor, but they could be. Like Moxfield is great. And so, yeah, you gotta, I mean, I would say you gotta transfer everything from tapped out, but apparently you can't, because
no, but I do think I have this one on. Yeah. So nice. The name of the deck, because when you brew a deck, you get to name it whatever you want, is Shark Attack. And I originally brewed this deck like 8-9 years ago, back before even Experiment 1 was a card in Pauper. And
that's the best evolve creature.
And it was initially all built around evolve with what's it called again? The 1/5 that returns a permanent when you play it.
Yeah, Dreamstalker. Yeah.
Dreamstalker. Yep. So it was built around Dreamstalker so that you could just trigger all of your evolve over and over again.
That's pretty great, because I mean, Dreamstalker, you can bounce itself, so 2 mana.
Yeah, like but 2 mana is so expensive that it's hard.
I've tried to build, because Core Skyfisher, one of my favorite cards in Pauper. Dreamstalker is so much worse, but I've tried to build a lot of like, blue-red synth, substitute your white for your blue so you can use that. And Reality Acid, of course, was a card for a long time that they comboed with that, but like, no, 1/5 does not attack anywhere near as hard as a 2/3 with flying,
Yes. All right, there's the Moxfield. All right. Well, good. Well, for those of you that stuck around for the long conversation, you got to hear a little bit more. But other than that,
last little thing, sorry, because you just mentioned when you brew a deck, you get to choose the name. Unless I'm mistaken, I'm very confident. I'm pretty sure I was the one who came up with the name for Black Sack. So Everyone else was calling it Mono Black Sacrifice, and
Mhm.
that's cumbersome. So I was like, well, I love a good rhyme. So
Yeah.
that's my claim to fame.
That's great. That's great. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we'll catch up later.
See you next time.